Can people hear me? Yes.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Great.
Good evening, Professor.
How's everybody doing? Oh, Eric is out there. Let's see who's here. I see everybody that's here. I don't see, okay, tomorrow. Good evening. Well, great to see everybody. Good evening. I love all your good evenings to everyone. It's very nice, Jacqueline and everyone. So I'm gonna just dive right into the next story today. I read a little bit of it. I was gonna give you a question, but I didn't put it on the thing. Just so you all know, one of the things that these last couple weeks, I've been on a search committee. I don't know if I mentioned, it's been like all month. So the first thing I had to do was review 255 applications. I had to review resumes for professors. And then now we're doing interviews, and we're interviewing 11 professors. So in addition to everything else we're doing, but the last interview is on Friday. So after Friday, I will have, instead of a super crazy schedule, I'll have a regular crazy schedule. So I will catch up on stuff. I did, but at this point, everybody, all the loose ends from the poetry essay were corrected and sent. So you should have received them. I don't see Lorraine on here. Oh yes, Lorraine, if you're hearing me, I had sent you yours on the 8th, but I just forwarded it to you again. So
Thank you.
So just take a look at it. And anyone else, if you're like, wait, I didn't get my poetry, let me know, because it's not on Blackboard. I emailed it to you in an email that said graded essay. And if you were missing one, also on Monday, whenever it was that class ended, after class, I sent an email to 3 or 4 of you that as of this moment, I don't have a record. One of you, it was 5, but one of you pointed out that it was in the email. So I saw it in the email and I responded. So
you sent it to my host's email or my personal one?
I forwarded it to whatever email you sent to me saying, Professor, I didn't see it. I forwarded it right to that one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
But let me know.
I got mine too, Professor. Thank you. I got it today.
All right, good.
Thank you.
But if you didn't get it, Lorraine, let me know. And if you have a personal email, I'll just send it there. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and we'll begin with this. Okay. Slideshow from the current slide. From the beginning, okay. So when we left off class, I began talking about a writer and I read the beginning of a story called Alma by Junot Diaz. And so let's talk about him a little more. So he wrote a collection of stories in 1996. I can't believe it was that far ago, called The Brief, and a collection of stories called Drown. And then and the novel, The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. And that won the Pulitzer Prize in 2007. And he wrote another short story collection called This Is How You Lose Her in 2012, that came out in 2012. He was born in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic on December 31st, 1968. So this year, December 31st, what year are we in? So I guess he's 47, I guess. He has 2, or maybe older. I can't do math right now.
53, Professor.
Okay,
53, yep.
So he'll be 53 years old. He has 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and growing up, Diaz and his siblings lived in Santo Domingo with their mother, while Diaz's father came to the States to work, and his father sent for his family when Diaz was 7. So their family lived in a poor part of New Jersey, populated primarily by Dominicans. So his story is a similar story that many people have of a parent or a family member immigrating to America, establishing themselves, and then working to bring their families over. So he wrote Drown in 1996 and received a lot of awards for it. And it was translated in 1997. And he had a 2-book deal. And so the second book was the Oscar Wilde. And he found it difficult to write after the first one. In fact, another novel, he didn't publish one from 2006 to 1996, 2007. So almost 11 years later was when the novel came out. And let's see. So he's known for his fair narrative style, his seamless integration of Spanish into English text, and both drown in the beautiful life of Oscar Wilde, explore the violence of history in the Dominican Republic and the violence that occurs on an everyday basis in the lives of characters. His third book, This Is How You Lose Her, was published in 2012, and the story Alma is one of the stories that comes from that book. In the wake of the novel, Diaz has been the recipient of many awards and fellowships, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, a MacArthur Genius Award, and a Pulitzer Prize. So Diaz is a professor of creative writing at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Diaz currently lives in Boston, as far as I know. The next part, so I'm also sharing something biographical. He was accused of sexual misconduct, and this is an article if you want to read it. And then, but he is also cleared of the misconduct. There's another article clearing it, and we can talk about that, later if we want to, if it comes up. But I put this quote, and we're going to see more of it later. But Diaz, critic or a literary critic, wrote, Diaz uses sex, curse words, and raw street language as part of a practice called the shock of representation. And that was going to be your question. How do you understand the shock of representation? What we'll do now is, I said that I started reading it, but we'll have a reading by this actor named, I forget his name, Victor Razzouk. And so he's going to read it and do a much better job than I did. But he will do. It's great to hear an actor read the work.
I wouldn't say that.
Say it again. Oh, you.
You read really well, because even last night I watched your thing, and you read that poem with the heartbeat. You read it so much better.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So here we're going to take a look at it. I also want to say that before I play it, so this piece, if I move this here, says from the New Yorker. If you see it down here on the bottom of the screen here, it's from the New Yorker. And the New Yorker is a magazine that publishes commentary and political essays, and they're very, very, very famous for publishing one piece of short fiction in every issue. It's one of the few magazines, and they also publish poetry and art in it. But if you haven't seen the New Yorker, it's an interesting magazine, but it's considered one of the validating things. It's very difficult to get published in the New Yorker. And so Junot Diaz has been published in there many times. And Alma, the story appeared in the New Yorker. So here is, let's see, Seth Link works. And then let me know if you—
At T-Mobile for Business, unconventional thinking means we see things different.
Of course you have to suffer through ads, but let me know if you can't hear it. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the volume up.
My name is Deborah.
Can people hear that?
And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first New Yorker Speakeasy, Love is Strange. The series of evenings is inspired by a column called Speakeasy Nights, which ran in the magazine in the late 1920s, in which the writer of life of Oscar Wilde won the Pulitzer Prize. I hope he has a good sense that has actually caused canceled subscriptions last year. This story, Alma, appeared in the magazine just over a year ago.
Sorry.
And it's actually the only story I can think of in the last 10 years or so whose sexual content has actually caused canceled subscriptions. One subscriber wrote, "What on earth possessed you to publish such pornographic trash? I have given gift subscriptions to my grandson and my son-in-law, whose household includes 2 young girls. I only hope he has the good sense to tear out those pages." So here to read those pages for us tonight, well torn out, is Victor Razzouk, who has appeared in Raising Victor Vargas, in Lords of Dogtown, and in Che, among other things. Please welcome Victor Razzouk.
Welcome. Happy Valentine's Day as well. Alma by Junot Diaz. You have a girlfriend named Alma who has a long, tender horse neck and a big Dominican ass that seems to exist in a 4th dimension beyond jeans. An ass that could drag the moon out of orbit. an ass she never liked until she met you. Ain't a day that passes that you don't want to press your face against that ass or bite the delicate sliding tendons of her neck. You love how she shivers when you bite, how she fights you with those arms that are so skinny they belong on an after-school special. Alma is a Mason Gross student, one of those Sonic Youth comic book reading alternatinas without whom you might never have lost your virginity. Grew up in Hoboken, part of the Latino community that got its heart burned out in the 80s, tenements turning to flame. Spent nearly every teenage day on the Lower East Side. Thought it would always be home. But then NYU and Columbia both said, niet, and she ended up even farther from the city than before. She is in a painting phase, and the people she paints are all the color of mold, look like they've just been dredged from the bottom of a lake. Her last painting was of you, slouching against the front door. Only your frowning, I had a lousy third world childhood and all I got was this attitude eyes recognizable. She did give you one huge forearm. I told you I'd get the muscle, man. The past couple of weeks, now that the warm is here, Alma has abandoned black. Started wearing these nothing dresses made out of what feels like tissue paper. It wouldn't take more than a strong wind to undress her. She says she does it for you. I'm reclaiming my Dominican heritage, which ain't a complete lie. She's even taking Spanish to better minister your mom. And when you see her on the street flaunting, you know exactly what every nigga that walks by is thinking. You met at the weekly Latin parties at the Down Under, New Brunswick. She never went to those parties, was dragged there by her high school best friend, Patricia, who still listens to TKA. And this was how you got the chance to strike while, as your voice put it, the pussy was hot. Alma is slender as a reed. You, a steroid-addicted block. Alma loves driving. You, books. Alma owns a Saturn, bought for her by her carpenter father who speaks only English in the house. You have no points on your license. Alma's nails are too dirty for cooking. Your spaghetti con pollo is the best in the land. You are so very different. She rolls her eyes every time you turn on the news and she says she can't stand politics. She won't even call herself Hispanic. She brags to her girls that you're a radical and a real Dominican. Even though on the Platano index you wouldn't rank, Alma only being the third Latino you've ever really dated. You brag to your boys that she has more albums than any of them do. That she says terrible white girl things while you fuck. She's more adventurous in bed than any girl you've had. On your first date, she asked you if you wanted to come on her tits or her face. And maybe during boy training, you didn't get one of the memos, but you were like, neither. And at least once a week, she will kneel on the mattress before you and with one hand pulling at her dark nipple, will play with herself, not letting you touch at all. Fingers whisking the soft of her face looking desperately, furiously happy. She loves to talk while she's being dirty too. Will whisper, you like watching me, don't you? You like listening to me come. And when she finishes, lets out this long, demolished groan. And only then will she allow you to pull her to an embrace as she wipes her gummy fingers on your chest. This is me, she says. Yes, it's an opposites attract sort of thing. It's a great sex sort of thing. It's a no thinking sort of thing. It's wonderful. Wonderful. Until one June day, Alma discovers that you are also fucking this beautiful girl named Lakshmi. Discovers the fucking of Lakshmi because she, Alma, the girlfriend, opens your journal and reads. Oh, she's had her suspicions. She waits for you on the stoop. And when you pull up in her Saturn and notice the journal in her hand, your heart plunges through you like a fat bandit through a hangman's trap. You take your time turning off the car. You are overwhelmed by pelagic sadness. Sadness at being caught, at the incontrovertible knowledge that she will never forgive you. You stare at her incredible legs and between them, to that even more incredible popola you've loved so inconstantly these past 8 months. Only when she starts walking over in anger do you finally step out. You dance across the lawn, powered by the last fumes of your outrageous sinvergüencería. Hey, muñeca, you say, prevaricating to the end. When she starts shrieking, you ask her, darling, whatever is the matter? She calls you a cocksucker, a punk motherfucker, a fake ass Dominican. She claims you have a little penis, no penis, and worst of all, that you like curried pussy. Which really is unfair, you try to say, since Lakshmi is technically from Guyana, but Alma isn't listening. Instead of lowering your head and copying to it like a man, you pick up the journal as one might hold a baby's beshattered diaper, as one might pinch a recently benutted condom. You glance at the offending passages. Then you look at her and smile. A smile your dissembling face will remember till the day you die. Maybe, you say, baby, this is part of my novel. This is how you lose her. The end.
Okay, so there's Victor Razuk's reading of Alma. The only thing I wish that they had it without the audience, because the audience kind of, you have to pause and wait. But what do you think of the story? Anything that comes to mind?
Culture.
All right, Gregory, I think was first, and then I think Johanny.
Well, definitely it was shocking. I don't know why, because all those words I've heard before, and I probably said 85% of those words as well. But at the same time, I just saw Alma as a real person who was proud of herself and not afraid to express it. And yeah, that's what I thought about it.
Cool. Johanny?
I saw, first of all, I tried pulling what representation, because I really didn't know the term. So I kind of dig into the story and I try to see if it was like representing what it was representing. And the cheater Latino man, her curvy body of a Hispanic woman. Then I pick up on the food and the culture, and also the different cultures, because it also said about Guyana and the seasoning herbs of a different culture. And how one thing that caught my attention, it was the dad not wanting to speak Spanish in the house, which is something that at times when we migrate to a different country, we kind of want to lose and change our past. And those were the things that I pick up.
Great, thanks. Mabel?
I enjoyed this book when I read it, but I also felt like I was conflicted because of the description of Alma. It made me feel a lot of things, like, I feel like those are common views of women with that figure, like, women being sexualized. when not, when not necessarily that's the case, right? You could just have this figure, and I mean that's how you were made. So, I enjoyed the story because I feel like the language he uses is impactful, right? It's meant to get the reader's attention.
Mhm.
But I guess, and he's one of my favorite authors. But then you start to look at things differently, and yeah. So it was just pretty. It was the verbiage, and I think that's the point of his writing. Like you said, that's how he speaks to his audience, and it is engaging. But like even when he was comparing her to the vehicle, what was it he said? He said, Alma's, oh, not that, Alma's nails are too dirty for cooking. When he said that,
Mhm.
like, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of women who may look like Alma that actually love cooking.
Mhm.
So, I think my feelings, I enjoyed the book, but my feelings were a little conflicted in the way he described Alma.
Mhm. Well, I mean, all right, yeah. Any other? We'll unpack all of these ideas and more. Any other folks want to share a thought or a feeling or a reaction or react to anything that's already been said?
Yeah, one more thing. Yeah, I mean, there is a two side to the story. I did like the story for the reason I said first. But and then there was that other part of me that was saying, my God, this is so degrading, so racist, so name calling, and what's the word? Oh, I can't believe I forget it. Bias, and what's that word when you describe someone like the big butt, like a Dominican? It's like saying
Stereotypes, like stereotypical.
very stereotypical. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. I see Jahani's hand, but anybody who hasn't spoken want to say anything before I toss her the ball? All right, Jahani, take it away.
I also saw and explored the relationship. It wasn't really a relationship because they were like polar opposites with each other. Whatever he liked, she didn't like. And he saw her like a sex symbol. It was all over written in the story, nothing else.
Yeah, those are all good, really great observations. And I think one of the reasons why I like to use this story in particular, and that's what we'll read one more by him, which is the for next week, and then we'll do an exercise together as a group, in groups. But because on the one hand, this gets, go ahead, Mabel, do you have another thought?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to also add, because I said all those things, and like I said, he is one of my favorite authors. But in the book, this is just one story in the book. In the entire book, all the stories that he has there, and then he ends with, "This is how you lose her," and I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly how you lose her, behaving in this manner." So I feel like it's a message to the masses, but also like exposing them. So I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't know.
No, yeah, all of you are hitting so many of the right notes, or of the notes, not the right ones. They're just so many notes to be played with this story. But yes, I mean, I think on the one hand, you could, this story is like just a few pages, and it does so much in these 2 pages. So you're right. On the one hand, there are ideas of stereotypes, right, inside of it. Yes, there's ideas of stereotypes inside of it. And so so that's why, in a way, before we do this, one of the things we did we do the danger of the single story in this class? No, I don't think we danger of the single story. Maybe I'll send you all that. This is a great TED talk called The Danger of the Single Story. And this is by one of the writers that we're going to hopefully get to read next week, by Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi. She's a Nigerian writer.
Professor, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I actually use the dangers of single stories with my students, because we do a narrative unit.
Mhm.
And then at the end, they write they interview each other, and then one person tells their story, and we like publish it for them. Like we got it in print as a book.
Oh, cool. So tell us what you remember from The Danger of the Single Story. So
So basically, in her TED talk, she's just speaking about her experience and how everyone has this idea. First of all, when people say, "Oh, where are you from? Africa," as opposed to like, "Where in Africa?" Right? Like, there's, that's the continent. There's so many different
Right.
areas, and then just this, people have this idea of or this misconception of like, oh, there's giraffes everywhere, and just the ignorance of it, and they think that everyone is poverty stricken, and that there aren't any areas that thrive. So that danger of that one perspective that people may have about this concept. So it's dangerous because you only have this one view as opposed to your own experience with what this might be like. And then, people have this one view and then they tell that story, that they create that narrative for others who also probably have had no experience to tell. So, and just understanding that concept of it's best when you tell your own story as opposed to having someone say it for you.
Mhm. Yeah, so, and it's interesting that the piece is called The Danger of the Single Story, right? And so one of the things that she says in there, that the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, is that they are incomplete, right? So that if you think of a stereotype to define a person, but that's not the whole story, right? And I think one of the things of becoming an educated person or a thinking person is that you would question that if you think that something is one way, that you question it, right? And so in a way, for us to talk about that, like in this case, like we know sometimes the stereotypes bother us because also the stereotypes highlight things that may not necessarily be flattering, right? They may be things that, like some of the stereotypes we like, right? For those of us who are, Latino, the Latin lover, that we're passionate, we like that one, right? That we're lazy, we don't like that one, right? So,
And
but
also, sorry, Professor.
yeah,
And also the stereotyping, like, because you're like dark skin, they expect that you don't speak Spanish.
yes,
Like
right.
some people look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so these ideas that we understand. So I think in the classroom we could talk about them, and so yeah, we can acknowledge that in some ways, Diaz is working with stereotypes, and in some ways he's defined the stereotype, right? Because she is a sexy woman, but she's also an art student, and she goes to college, right? And her father's, a carpenter, but he clearly makes good money because he buys her the car, right? So there's this kind of this bigger picture. But I think what we react to a lot of times is the question of the shock of representation that I'm talking about. And so a lot of times this is what is called diction, right? Diction is how the person is speaking, right, in the piece, and the word and the language that he's using. And in this case, he uses sex, right? So he uses curse words and he uses street language. Those are three things that he uses. And as Gregory said, in a way, we're like not shocked because, you hear that on the subway sometimes, or riding the bus, or or in our own homes, or hanging out with our friends, we may use language like that. Sometimes it's shocking because you're like, oh my God, this is in a classroom. What are we studying? Oh my God, professor. That's why I pull it out of the New Yorker. So if anybody has any issues, and that woman, I show that little piece because even the New Yorker had people unsubscribing for them. But it doesn't, in terms of a piece of literature, it gives us a lot to talk about beyond what we're talking about now. And I think one of the things is thinking about the themes, right? As we talk about themes in any story, and some of you mentioned that, right? Some of you mentioned, I think Johanny mentioned fidelity, right? Mentioned, the relationship. Someone else talked about how opposites attract, right? Or disconnect, right? And then the last culture, it's all in there. The way he uses language, like mixing English and Spanish with the references he's making.
The
Food. And then the last line that Mabel shared with us, the last line, this is the thing with the reading that I don't like, because after he says that, people laugh, and then he says, this is how you lose her, right? So sometimes it sounds like it's not connected to what he said, but it's saying, because of all these things you do, right? You show up in her Saturn, right? You see her with the journal, you sit in the car, right? You're trying to figure out, you dance, hey, mamita, baby, like, what's the matter? Knowing that you should, instead of copying to it like a man and admitting to it, she may still but then he says, this is how you lose her, right? And this is how, like, by being dishonest, by all these things that we said, sexualizing her, not, you know, taking her, using her, lying, all these kinds of things, is that. So this is an example of a story that, let me pull it up on the screen so we could take a look at some of the text. If you look at the first line here, right? It says, you have a girlfriend named Alma who has a long, slender horse neck, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? You love how she shivers, right? It's saying you. So in it, this is a story that's written in, people tells it first, second, third person. He's using you. Second, right? I see the fingers going up. It's written in second person. So we don't get a lot of stories written in second person, but he's writing in second person. And in second person, he's addressing the reader. So who's he talking to? Who's the you he's talking to?
Alma's boyfriend, right?
Well, he is the Alma boyfriend, but he's talking to the Alma boyfriends of the world. Right?
Yeah.
He's speaking to other guys. And he's saying, you have a girlfriend. This is how you treat her, and this is how you lose her, right? So, so he's using second person as a device to kind of talk to men, right? To, in a way, we're saying to expose how men sometimes behave in relationships and the results of their behavior, and the way in which they view women and the way in which they treat women. So sometimes it's justified his point of view because he's inside of the head of this kind of guy, right? That some of these people might know, but there's no guys like that in this class, right? Or you can own up to it. I mean, sometimes, you know, men feel very differently. They feel like, well, you know, come on, you know, but it's okay if you do identify, if you do that, it's okay. We're cool with it.
I also think it's important to mention like the almas of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, you know, women, we own our sexuality and, you know, use it for our benefit. Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was some characters in there where I was like, oh man, I think I've done that before, right? So I feel like, you know, he was talking too much, Juno, in that book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so let me stick with the book for one more thing. So the way he is speaking, let me go back to the sharing the screen. So second person, I want to point that out, that he does that in the book. He's also doing something with language. On the one hand, he's speaking, we're saying mixing Spanish and English, like if I look right here, you know, he's talking about, he says the plátano index, you know, that's a plátano is a plant, it's a plantain, a green plantain. And it's symbolic of Dominican culture, but he's saying so, and he's not really a Dominican on that, if you use that thing. He uses also
That word, muñeca.
muñeca. Here's another word.
La mala palabra, sinvergüenza.
Sinvergüencería, right? He uses a lot of Spanish. But he's also, yes.
Popola, yes.
Right. You know, honestly, I didn't know what that meant, because, you know, like I'm not, I mean, I know what it now it is, but when I first read the
it's
story,
the female part.
Yeah, I had to look it up.
Okay.
I had to look it up because this is not a word that I use. But in it, he's also doing things like here's when he says Columbia at NYU said niet. Niet means no in Russian. So he's also threw a Russian word inside of it. And then at the end, he kind of also uses, like, in a way, as much as he's using street language, he also gets really uses high vocabulary. I'm trying to make this smaller so that I can see the full page. One second. Oh, I did it. Okay, there we go. He uses words. He says, you take, I'm going to read this section here, right? You take your time turning off the car. You're overwhelmed by the pelagic sadness, right? Pelagic sadness. Sadness at being caught at the uncontrovertible knowledge, right? So in one line, he uses the word like pelagic, which means so deep, all the way in the ocean, the deepest, deepest, deepest part in the ocean, like so deep. So the sadness is pelagic sadness, uses the word incontrovertible, like you just, there's no doubt, there's no way you can go back, knowledge that you have, knowledge that she will never forgive you. And then here's the way it goes to the Popola, you've 8 months, she starts to walk to your car, raising the groseria, and then, hey, muñeca, you say, prevaricating to the very end, right? When she starts to shriek and she does her whole litany of, cursing him out. And then instead of lowering your head and copying to a man, you hold the shattered diaper, right? Benutted condom, and you say, and smile a smile your dissembling face will remember until the day you die. Baby, oh baby, this is part of my novel. So looking at Junot Diaz's diction, right, of how he's using like curse words and street language, and then he throws in these multi-syllable, high vocabulary words inside of it, is another thing that he's doing, that he's weaving into the work that he's doing. And at the end of it, we can talk about all these themes. We could talk about it from the point of view, or first person point of view, right? We can talk about the freaking imagery, right, that he uses in it, right? His description of Alma, the whole sex scene with her, it's just like, it almost makes you uncomfortable, right? Well, me, I should just, at first, it makes me uncomfortable. Sometimes I ask students to read, but I never ask students to read that story. I just usually read it myself, or I found the Victor Rasuk reading of it, which I like. And sometimes I'll have him read it because I think it's a story that's good to listen to it. So there's all these angles from which you can come at this story, right? And again, it's like 2 pages. We could also do a character analysis, right? We can do a whole description of this character, right? And this whole description of Alma, right? All the things, like her physical appearance, her, her values, right? She can't stand politics, right? That she doesn't go out, right? She met him because her girlfriends dragged her out and made her go out dancing that night. If we were talking about setting, like we can tell, what time frame do you think this is? There's a couple of hints, because sometimes they tell you, but sometimes there's little markers.
It's a school. Isn't it a school?
No,
Like a college?
She goes to college, right?
I thought it was like a dorm for some reason. I thought like that type of life.
Mm-hmm. But what era do you think it is?
It's summer. It's summer. It said something about the tissue dress and stuff.
When the warm weather. But what decade? What years?
It says something about the 80s. So it was past the 80s. It could be.
Yeah, so it's the 80s. There's all these 80s indicators, right? Particularly when her friends listen to TKA. People who know TKA was like a Latino group that was popular in the 80s, like 80s into the 90s. Yes, late 80s, early 90s, I think TKA. So anyway, there's just a lot of like happening inside of the story. Let me go back to the PowerPoint because I want to talk a little bit, want to make sure I hit all my notes with the PowerPoint here. Okay. So language is one of the things that he deals in Alma, just as a summary of what we've been talking about. So he does bilingual in Spanish. He writes in English and uses curse words and phrases in Spanish, specifically Dominican expressions, right? Occasionally drops in a popular phrase from another language like Russian, yet. And what effect does that have, right? So it brings it connects to a particular audience. It's speaking to the community, but also to a literary community. He uses cursors, he uses urban street language. He drops in big words like pelagic and incontrovertible. And then now we're back at this question. So what do you think, when you say the shock of representation, what do you think that phrase means? The shock of representation.
Maybe the way he's like talking about the female, or how he's presenting.
Yes.
her.
So that's one way, right? That he speaks about this very visceral is like in your face, right? Way of talking about something. And he represents whatever it is, the woman, the themes, the idea, the way he does representation could be shocking. Now, on the one hand, I'll go back to Gregory's comment at the beginning that to many of us, like outside of this situation, none of that is shocking, right? But in this context, and reading it like this and all together in the story, there is a shocking element, even for those of us who, might hear language like that. Maben?
I was thinking just the representation of the community.
Mhm.
Because since he's a Dominican author, I
Mhm.
feel like those behaviors may resonate in that community.
Right.
And to be represented in that way
Mhm.
is shocking, exposed.
Yeah. Right. So that's another thing, right? Like in terms of like most people who write about their communities sometimes write about them in an expansive way. And sometimes the very communities love them and hate them at the same time, right? And so an example is, I don't know who will get to read Sherman Alexie's, because I think I would want to read Chimamanda's um, story. But there's another story in our folder by Sherman Alexie, and he's a Native American writer, and he writes a lot about Native American issues, and he interweaves culture and history and all that stuff in there, but he also talks about them in a way, it's fiction, remember, but talks about them like from a real angle. And so, as any community, most communities have issues, but one thing that is pretty prevalent in Native American communities is alcoholism. So his main character is alcoholic, and many of his characters are alcoholic. And the Native American community is like, enough already with the alcoholic Indians, write about somebody else, But that's what he finds interesting in. So sometimes our very own communities are like, stop it. I write about the nice things. I'll only write about, the things that we don't want to be put out there, right? So so that's one concept of the so in essence, Juno is trying to shock us, right? Juno is trying to wake us up. Juno is trying to create language that he feels you say is inappropriate in this venue, and I say that it is, right? You might think that I don't belong here in the New Yorker, but I do, right? And then by him saying that he belongs there, in a sense, we all belong there, right? He brings the entire community with him into those circles, right? Because we have a connection, and it's as Mabel and I'm talking about, it might be a conflicted connection that we have, right? It might be a little bit of conflict inside of that, like, I love you, I hate you, shut the hell up, keep reading, keep writing, keep representing, but that it's a conflicted one. So let me just go over a couple more things.
It's like provoking a reaction.
Yes, right. It totally provokes a reaction, right? You cannot be, I don't know too many people who are neutral about his work.
Yeah.
People have something to say, right?
That's a reaction, right? I mean, using this type of language and image evokes a lot of reaction on both sides.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about language in it. So again, we could do like, you could talk about the characters. So Junior is the narrator, and he goes to Rutgers, so we know that. He's dating another student, Alma, right? He's physically attracted to her. That is unquestionable. He's interested in reading books and exercising, right? Because he's got a big forearm. She's very skinny and he's kind of built. The basis of his relation with Alma is their physical attraction to one another and their sexual activities. And we could say more and the things he likes the things she brings, like a car and music and that kind of things. He secretly has a sexual relation with a freshman student named Lakshmi, and when confronted by Alma, Junior lies, and the journal is a part of a fiction writing project of his, right? He lies to her. Alma, she's the title of character of the story. She's Dominican, was born and raised in Hoboken. She loves New York City, but she was rejected by the New York colleges to which she applied, and she consequently attends Rutgers University. She enjoys painting despite her apparent lack of skill, and she enjoys driving. She's in a relationship with Junior, and this relationship is mostly sustained on the basis of their sex life together. Despite being born in the United States, Alma's Dominican heritage is important to her. She likes that Junior was born in the Dominican Republic, and she takes Spanish classes to have a better command of the language. So symbolism in this piece is Alma's body. Like, her body is a symbol of the shallow attachment that Junior has to her. And Junior discusses his affection for Alma, is mostly regarding when he talks about her, it's just talking about her beauty. Even at the last minute, what he's looking at is her legs and what's between them, right? So that is, so Junior acknowledges they don't have much in common in terms of personality or interests, right? They don't like the same things, but the relationship is built on a shallow foundation, right? And sex, right? Sex symbolizes false intimacy, right? Despite Junior's physical attraction to Alma, his descriptions of their physical intimacy together depict sex as an awkward and even uncomfortable for Junior. Despite Junior's general enjoyment of sex with Alma, the sex is not portrayed as having any connection to meaningful intimacy. Then Lakshmi symbolizes Junior's lack of loyalty, right? This is how characters can act as symbols, right? Alma eventually discovers that Junior's having a sexual relationship, etc. And then Junior's journal, his journal symbolizes secrets and dishonesty. When Alma reads the journal, she discovers Junior's infidelity. Junior dishonesty is due to the lack of his loyalty and the lack of truly meaningful connection between himself and Alma. The journal represents the only clear register of Junior's dishonesty and the secrets he keeps from Alma. So this is a quote that comes from this line comes from the Diaz uses sex and curse words line that I showed you earlier. So the blog Great Writers Steal says Junio Diaz is one of the generation's vast prize of literary lions. The Dominican American broke through big time with the brief and wondrous life of Oscar Wilde and is now collecting awards when he's not teaching at MIT. Alma features many of Mr. Diaz's common themes and literary techniques. The second person story stars Junior, a young man challenged by fidelity. The story employs a hyperkinetic, hyper-heterosexual diction that reads like a conversation with a lively and worldly friend. Junior is proud of his Dominican heritage and sees the world through a lens influenced by the language and culture. Diaz uses sex, curse words, and raw street language as part of a practice called the shock of representation. So one of the things you could consider with this essay, amongst everything we just discussed, is that you could write an essay that discusses and demonstrates your understanding of the common themes and the literary techniques of which we have just talked about at least, half a dozen in Alma, as well as what the blog means by the shock of representation. So these are ways you can use this as the beginning of a formulation of a thesis statement, where this is a story you would like to focus writing your fiction essay on. And so I'm going to upload the PowerPoint to the site, but it's something for you all to think about, right? Because the fiction essay, I'm going to put it up over the weekend, the instructions for it. And the instructions is going to be similar to poetry, right? Or you can look at the Alma thing, and then next week we'll have another prompt for you to look at. And there may be ways, there may be things for you to consider. But basically, the fiction essay is going to be for you to look at. You can pick any of the stories that we've written. And I think I talked about this last class a little bit, right? That you could focus, after we spoke about the arm and forgiveness, right? And that you could focus on symbolism. And now we've got, in addition to the symbolism in sticks and the symbolism in just about every story, we've got more character symbols, object symbols in this. So if you wanted to write a paper about symbols and you can use different stories, you can do it that way. Or a story like Rebecca Brown's Forgiveness, the arm is so rich as a symbol, you could write just as an arm and a symbol. Or if you don't want to write about symbols at all, you don't have to write about symbolism. You can write about other literary techniques. You can talk about language, you can talk about diction, you can talk about character, you can talk about plot, you can do a character analysis, right? Of this story, there's two. Of the judge's wife, there's three at least. You can do four if you want to do the mom, right? In Cathedral, there's three characters, right? The wife, the husband, and the visitor. So you have lots of options, right? So now I think you should be thinking about what are these stories that you want to sit with and read more and write a paper about, right? So we will have, I'm going to pause, see if there's any questions about the essay of what I'm talking about. You got it? Okay.
Me,
Yes.
Professor Mayeli. Okay, let me put the camera. I'm multitasking today. That's my daughter. I have a question about the essay. The essay is gonna be due next Wednesday, right? That's what you say. On the let me see.
Let me look at my calendar.
Let me check the
No.
calendar.
The 7th, I said November.
On the 7th, yeah. I'm just okay, let's see. All right. So
I guess she's talking to somebody else. Okay.
I'm sorry, it's just my mom. She was talking. I muted myself
Okay.
because I don't want you to listen her and me. It's hard. So, and then okay, it's gonna be on the 7th, and you are going to poster in the way you want the
Yeah,
essay to be,
so
right? Like
I'm gonna do just the instructions, right? Like I did for the poetry. So I'm gonna do two parts.
poetry.
One is gonna be the general prompt, right? And I can tell you now, it's the general prompt is gonna be like select a poem, select a short story or short stories, and discuss literary elements in a well-formed essay, right? And then it's gonna say it's gonna be 3 to 5 pages, usually MLA formatting. That means the name, the title, the double spacing, the 1-inch margin, all that stuff. It'll explain all of that. So, and then you're gonna have, you'll pick one of 3 prompts, right? So one prompt is gonna be the general one, like we're talking about. You can pick any stories or any essays, and any stories or discuss any elements of fiction, right? Dramatic arc, maybe you want to do the dramatic arc of one, talk about climax and all that, though you can talk about all those things. Or there's a question specifically for Alma. There's going to be a question specifically for Apollo as well, which is a story we're going to read next week. And if you wanted to do one of those, so you will have an option of any of those 3 prompts for the essay.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Thanks a lot. I was a little distracted. I just moved and it's
Yeah,
at the same time, it's too
transition.
much. Go to work and my daughter and my mom and move to the city, go to work to the city, come back, get class. It's just like too much. I feel like
Okay. All right.
overwhelmed. Thank
So
you, Professor.
you're welcome. I've gotten a request. Yes.
Adama has a question in the chat.
Yeah, I just saw. I was gonna thank you, Sessa. So Adama, I guess she wants me to set up a page again, right? To show how to do the formatting and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay. So I will do that. I will do that. I'm gonna do that at the very end of the class, which is we're coming up. I want to talk about one more thing, which is the next story, and then everybody's welcome. I'll do the same thing. I'll share my screen. I'll open a Google Doc. I'll do it. I'll open a regular doc and I'll do it. And you can all look at it. But once I tell you about the story next week, that if you don't want to see me format a page, you can go home. You can go do whatever you want to do. Okay. So for next week, we read. Now you know Junot Diaz a little bit, right? Through his work, we talked about all that. So I want you to read a second story that's in there. It's called The Buddha Principle, right? And that story is a little longer. I'm going to warn you now, it's not 2 pages, it's longer. So you should not wait till,
What's the name of it again?
I'll put it in the chat. I'll write it in the chat. Where's the chat? Right, the Buddha Principle. Buddha is just the name of a character, and Buddha means pure. That's in Spanish it means pure. So so take a look at that one. That'll be the story we're going to read next week. We're going to post your fiction assignment, but also post some questions. The questions that I'm going to pose for the Buddha Principle, what we'll do is when we get back together next week, there'll be that, and then 1 or 2 other questions I'm going to ask you to look at, but we're going to work together and we're going to give we'll break up into just 3 groups. And so we'll see how that works. So you can talk about that story a little bit. But yes, that's it. I'm going to also speak a little bit about a change that I'm going to do. So we're coming in for landing over the next 2 weeks. We'll be done with fiction for now. And we're going to transition into theater, but I'm going to instead go into the research project that we're going to do in the class, because I think I want to get a little more of a head start on it. So we're going to talk about the research project, and there's some instruction I have to do. I want to talk about a research paper. There's a little bit of a library workshop I want to do. And so I think we'll do that, and then we will transition to theater, and then by then it'll be Thanksgiving. And once Thanksgiving comes, the semester is almost over. So yeah, I know it's almost done. So we're like on next time we see each other, it'll be November. So so once Thanksgiving comes, and Thanksgiving is I think it's like late. Yeah, so Thanksgiving is like the 24th, 25th. And then we have like basically 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And so those last couple of weeks are us wrapping things up. We're going to be working on doing one last section, which is just 2 days when we get back from Thanksgiving. We go back to slam poetry, which is performance poetry. And then we'll prepare for the final exam, which will be an exam that it's going to be a paper you take home. You take it home, and if we were live, usually they do it in the classroom. One day we meet for a double class period and you write an essay live. But since online classes, we've been doing it as. So then for the final exam, I will need to teach you. The department picks a poem and a short story. And then I have to pick one of them and teach it to you. The way we've been doing it all semester. Like if it's a poem, I'll bring it in, we'll talk about it, we'll read it, we'll break it down bit by bit. We'll make sure that we understand it really well. And then finals week, you get the prompt gets put live on Blackboard, and then you have a week to write the essay and submit it for your final. So that's what we have. We're like in the midway point. Someone asked if there was a midterm. There really isn't a midterm, but the next essay is that. So your big graded assignments are the poetry we just did, the fiction one we're going to do next. You'll do one for the theater. That one's, but then also the research paper, and then the final. Those are the 5 pieces that make up a bulk of your grade. And then of course all your other assignments that you do, we'll do. I keep track of them, and then if you've done all your assignments, you get full credit for doing all the homework assignments. And if you don't, then that affects your grade as well. So it's 2 things that it's important to try to stay on top of the work, is because not only by doing the assignments, it helps you're building, so all these little assignments we did, like talking about symbolism and talking about doing a paragraph on this and that, you can use any of those assignments to build them into an essay, right? So that's that. Okay. All right. That's what I have. It's a lot. I know I fast forwarded to the end of the semester. Let's just get to next week. So next week, just read the Pura Principle, and then it's actually going to just be one question that I'm going to have you entertain, and the other 2 questions you're going to talk about, or the other question you're going to talk about in the group. Okay, and then I'm going to let Johnny ask a question and see if anybody else has a question, and then I'll do the formatting of the page.
Do you take off points for writing too much?
For writing too much?
Because I know that's my problem, as you can see.
Yeah, no, I don't think writing too much isn't. Well, writing too much, like, and use filler, then of course I start saying, because sometimes some of the, look at your paper, some people are repetitive, right? So they'll say something, so that's writing too much, that's not good, right? If you're repeating, like, I'm trying to think.
Redundancy. Yes,
Yeah,
I understand.
That's different, right? But being thorough is okay, right? That's fine. Mabel?
My question was about Blackboard. I know that you give us our grades on like the paper and stuff, but I was wondering, like, if on Blackboard you were going to like post it on there.
No.
No? Okay, so you're just gonna give us our grades on the paper, and then I guess.
Yeah. Then like after the next one, I mean, at this point you'll have 2, right? But at any point, like after usually 2 or 3 grades, sometimes you're like, for some reason, so it's like, what are my grades? And then we could also meet, and I can just show you what I've recorded as your grade in my grade book.
Okay. And you said that the homework assignments, they either bring up your grade or bring down your grade. Correct?
Well, the homework assignments, I believe, are like, I could look at the syllabus, but they are a percentage of the grade, right? So collectively. So what I do, just so since we're talking about grading, so what I do is, let's say there are 11 homework assignments, right? So if you do all 11, right, that's 100% of that grade, of that percentage, right? So that's the equivalent of an A, right? So if you do all of yours, if you miss one or two, then the grade starts going down, right? So if you miss one, it's an A minus. If you miss two, so and it goes down like that. So if you've done, if we've had 11 assignments and you've done 3, you're not going to get a lot of credit because you've not done most of the homework assignments.
Gotcha.
Now, will it fail you? Probably not, right? It may not fail you, but it's definitely, if you're working hard and you're getting A's and B's on your well, anyway, students that do A's and B's on their work are also the students who do the assignments. So there's a correlation. But if you're not, and you're doing B's and if you're doing A's and B's and you don't do your homework assignment, it's going to bring that A or B down, right? And if you're doing C's, and B's, it's going to bring it down even further. So, so it's and if you're doing D work, it might, but nobody's going to be doing D work by the end of the semester. Even if you got a D, you have a chance to revise and work on it. But so it's important to do them for 2 things. One, that it's just part of the method of development, right? So that when you sit down to write your research, your essay, you're not like saying, all right, so how do I do this? I mean, by then you've done a couple of, thesis statements, you've written a paragraph about symbolism, you've done some character development, right? We talked about the characters and, the judge's wife, so you've done some of the work so that when you're writing your paper, it's not starting from scratch.
Okay. Thank you, Professor.
I have a question, Professor. Refresh my memory. You said that we have been graded already for 2 assignments, correct?
For just the poetry.
Oh, just the poetry. Okay, so I thought you said 2, I was like.
He said going on to.
Yeah, will be. The next one will be on the 7th. You'll get graded for that one.
Okay.
And then it's fast. And then the research paper is going to come right after it. Then the theater one's going to come right after it. And then the final exam.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything.
I've never written a research paper.
Mhm.
Is there any other? That would be the writing center in case I need any suggestions or anything, or I can make appointments with you and you can break it down if anything for me.
Well, we're gonna break it down together as a class.
In the class, okay.
Right. So I'm gonna talk about the elements, the steps of it. That's why I'm also gonna do a library workshop with us, and then if you still have questions, you can have an appointment, or you can go to the writing center as well. But yeah, you're gonna have an option. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Professor?
Yes, April.
I have a question. Hi. For the second assignment, once you grade it, are we gonna have the opportunity, like the first assignment, to increase the grade if it's not such a grade? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You'll have an opportunity for revision with the fiction essay as well. Okay.
Professor.
Yes.
The fiction essay is on short stories. Can we submit a short story to use for our essay, or do you want us to stick to the ones that you've provided?
Yeah, if you can stick to the ones we've done in class.
Okay.
Or any of the ones in the folder. There may be 1 or 2 that we're not going to read in the class, but they're in the folder. So you can pick from those 2. Like I mentioned, the Sherman Alexie is one of them. There's one called The Good Man Is Hard to Find, which is a very popular short story. There's a story called A&P that I sometimes start the class out with, but I didn't this year. I started with another story. So with one of these days. So yeah, just whatever stories in the folder. Okay. All right, then I'm going to set up a paper demonstration for Adama and anyone else who wants to see it. Right, and so if you don't, have a good night. And if you stick around when I come back, then I'll say good night again. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. So the one way I think that most of us have access to is Google's, right? It's Google. Most of us Google, and Google has an app in it called Google Docs, right? And you can go into Google Docs and open up a blank file. You have to So like, let's say this is your blank file and you're going to begin your paper. Very often Google Docs and Word both sometimes automatically begin with a 1-inch margin. But in Google Docs, right, you go to Format, right, and then you go to, sorry, no, I think you go to, in Google Docs, you go to Page Setup, you go to File, then Page Setup. And here you can see the it's already at 1 inch, right? So we're good with that. And this is the whole document 1 inch. And you say, okay. So you go to check it. So it's already started with the 1-inch margin, right? So then you have to put your name. So I'm going to pick Adama, since she asked, right? You're going to put my name. Okay. The professor's name goes believe, sorry. You're going to put the class, English 111, 715A, and you're going to put the dates. So let's put today's date. Now, there's a couple ways you could format the date, but I'm just going to do it the regular way. So one of the things we have to do is make sure it's double spaced, and you could look at it by the eye, it's not. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to do format. And here's there's something called line spacing, right? Line and paragraph spacing. And then once you highlight it, you hover over it, it gives you single, 1.5, and doubles the one you want, right? So you put double, now it's double space, right? The next thing you put is a title, right? And then I'm going to say, you notice it automatically double spaced the title. Then you center it. And here on top, there's all these little symbols that are all about alignment. So if I hit the center one, it nicely, perfectly centers it. I mean, the other options, you want to go back to this margin, you could hit that button there, right? Back to center. If you want to hit the right margin, you can put it there, but this is where it belongs in the center, right? And then you begin your essay. So sometimes when you center, it automatically centers the next line. So the next line, you have to bring it back to the margin. And then let me just pick some text from somewhere. All the things I'm working on. Just get text from. I did this last, something else. Let me search for eggs. I just want to get text. I'm just getting any old text. So I'm back here. So then I start typing my essay, right? So it types it all in there. You notice it's double spaced automatically. There's extra spaces. I'm going to take all these extra spaces out, and I'm using the tab key to fix my paragraphs. I'm taking out the space between title because there's no extra spaces. There's an extra line space. Take it out. Hit tab to make the thing. Here's the next thing. Tab. Right. And this is what it looks like, and I'm going to repeat this so we have more text. Okay, so now we've got 3 pages. Now, if we to go to our list, let me go to Blackboard. I'm going to go to Blackboard for a minute.
The size, Professor, the font.
Say it again? Yeah. So there's a handout that I've given you. I'm just going to it so that sorry, it's still loading. So if you go to the formatting the first page, right, it talks about type your paper in the computer. The next thing is double space the text on your paper. We did that. The font should be 12 points, right? And it should be Times Roman or Arial. So I'm gonna go to the page or paper, and I could look here. It says normal text. It says Arial is already in Arial, and it should be 12 points. I'm gonna select it all. There's also a feature that says select all in it, but I'm gonna select all of them. One way is to highlight them and select the whole document. And then make this 12 point, so I make sure that's part's done, right? If you go back to the checklist, right, all this is going on here. It says to put your name and the page number. So the way you do it in Word is you insert, right? It's gonna say page numbers down here. It gives you where the location could be. But we want it in the upper right-hand corner. So this is the one I'm gonna click. Your name, the number appears there. You see this is Hobart because it's a header. And then I'm just clicking in front of the number because I need to type my last name. Right? I type my last name. I'm checking to make sure the font is the right. It's at 11. I'm going to highlight it and make it 12 so it's consistent. Right? And then I formatted this page. So it's 1-inch margin. You see the page number repeats. I don't have to type it in again on every page. And it's all formatted. Okay. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to do it again in Word. Okay, so now the other thing you can do is go to Word. Okay. Go to Word, you go File, you open a blank document. And so this one does it too, right? This one uses layout. So you go to Layout, it has margins, and you can see already the highlighted box. So it's all 1 inch. If it was something else, you could just change it here. And then I'm going to start with the name of the student. I'm just gonna, let me just do it this way. So if you notice that Word has, my Word anyway, but most words have some kind of default. Default font, default page, margins. So it's important to see them. And now I'm going to go to the home page. So this is a different, this is Calibri. And if I look at my list, it says Times Roman or Arial. So I'm going to go over here and pick one. Here's Times Roman. I'm going to use that one, just use a different one. Make sure it's 12 point, right? And then I'm going to type the title. I'm going to center it. This one also has these little icons for you to align the text, the centered one. So now it's centered automatically. Go below it, it did the same thing. I'm going to change it there. I'm going to type in my text. Right, so now the text is here. Oh, look, it translated. It didn't do my indentation. There's all this extra space between it. So I'm going to check the point size. That's 11. This is I mean, it's all 12. All right, so they're all the same point size. I'm clicking around the document, but then and I look up here. Okay, so that we've got that. Now I got to indent all these paragraphs. I'm going to use a tab key, indent the paragraph, indent the paragraph, indent the paragraph. Just one tab key indents the paragraph. Oops, sorry. Indent. Indent. Okay, so we've indented all our paragraphs. So Word automatically puts a space in between the paragraphs. I'm going to show you, like, I don't get too crazy, but sometimes to comply, you could either, as I'm doing, select the whole document by using the mouse, or in Word, there is this phrase here, select all, right? And I could then go to paragraphs, and paragraph shows spacing here, before and after. I'm going to make it 0 after. So now there's no extra spacing. So now I got to check the spacing as well to make sure it's double spaced. So I just selected it all. Same thing. We'll go to paragraph. You could either click the paragraph thing here and get it, or you can right click it and select paragraph. And then here has to be double spaced. So you see all the different options. I picked double, clicked it, and hit OK. And now it's all double spaced, right? And then the last thing I got to do is I'm checking my papers, put in the page numbers, and here as well, I believe is insert. Yeah, the page number. Now they're going to give you Word has more options. So once you go to the top of the page, you have all these options, and you're going to find the one you need, which is this one to the right. Then again, I'm in the header. I'm going to click in front of the number, like my cursor is all the way over here. I'm going to click, and I'm going to type in my name. And then I'm going to check the font, and I see that it's different. So I'm going to go over here and change it to Times Roman so that it matches my text. And I'm going to make this 12 point. And then I fix it. So it should repeat on every page. Diallo 2, Diallo 3. Okay. And that's the formatting. Okay. So the class is also being recorded. So I'll put it online. I think you're after with the last class online, and I'll put this online. And then you also have it there. Okay.
So we merge the page, word page before we write on it.
Say it again.
We do the merging before we write on it.
You could do it before, or you could do it after, right? After you could type your paper and then do kind of like what I was just doing, making sure I put in the professor's name, my name, professors, all that. Add the page number at the end. When you're ready to submit it, and you do a check to make sure you hit all those points, make sure it's double spaced, make sure. So then, so you can do it either way. You can set it up at the beginning or as you go, but definitely at the very end, you say, okay, let me look at the formatting. Is it Times Roman? Is it Arial? Is it everything 12 point? Is everything double spaced? Did I put the page number on the top? Did I do this? Is there a title, right? So all those things. Is it centered? So you can go through the checklist and do all those things.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. It's almost 7 o'clock, 6:53. So I ate before class because if I don't eat before class, I get dizzy and tired and hangry. So I eat before class. Anyway, thank you all. Thanks for your participation and thanks for being here. And I will see you all Monday. Have a good weekend.
Okay, bye.
All right, Professor. Thank
Bye.
you.
You too,
Be
Professor.
well. Have a
Bye,
good night.
everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.